World Bank keeps Vietnam's GDP growth of 5.6% in 2015. Vietnam receives an increasing amount of remittances. Welcome to Bizline, brought to you by VTV International. My name is Linh Hương. Today's episode of Bizline will be all about Vietnam's remittances. But before we get to that, let's take a look at several highlights in the economic scene for the past week. The World Bank has forecast that Vietnam's economy will grow by 5.6% in 2015, the same rate as last year. According to the bank's report, Global Economic Prospects 2015 released on January 13, Vietnam's gross domestic product, or GDP, growth will further improve in the next 2 years, reaching 5.8% in 2016 and 6% 1 year later. Vietnam's economy may grow stronger in the years to come thanks to recent political economic reforms and sharply increasing foreign direct investment flows, said the report. The World Bank also mentioned that although macroeconomic stability is solidifying, Vietnam's banking sector balance sheets need to be strengthened to improve access to credit, and that regulatory reform is also needed to level the playing field for private businesses, especially domestic ones, in relation to state-owned enterprises. The dong US dollar exchange rate, according to the State Bank of Vietnam, or SBV, was officially raised to 21,350 and 21,600 Vietnamese dong per US dollar for buying and selling from January 12. The new figures are up 150 Vietnamese dong and 200 Vietnamese dong on the previous prices. After a long period of maintaining a lower rate, and despite the 1% increase in the interbank exchange rate on the dong US dollar on January the 7th, the State Bank of Vietnam finally decided to adjust the price of the US dollar. The move is expected to stop the fall of the Vietnamese dong and support export businesses. The exchange rate of the State Bank of Vietnam is still higher than most rates offered at commercial banks. The move indicates that the State Bank of Vietnam is willing to buy dollars and use its foreign reserves to stabilize the market. With the government's determination to speed up the restructuring of the credit institution system, mergers and acquisitions in the banking sector were projected to boom in the coming years. Many global news agencies are reporting that the State Bank of Vietnam is drawing up M&A plans for some of the biggest banks in the country. Reuters reported that Vietinbank may be merged with Ocean Bank or PG Bank, while Vietcombank may see an acquisition with Saigon Bank. BIDV is also likely to be merged with the Mekong Housing Bank, or MHB. Other possible participants of this M&A plan include Maritime Bank, Sacom Bank, the Mekong Development Bank, and Southern Bank. Representatives from the State Bank of Vietnam stated that information about these plans is not yet official, and the central bank will make a public announcement when such plans are issued. Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng has green-lighted the program to develop and upgrade industrial clusters and value chains in 5 key sectors. The sectors are electronics and information technology, textiles, food processing, agricultural machinery, and tourism and related services. In detail, the program is designed to identify and develop potential regions with industrial clusters and products with competitive advantages. Additionally, the program will develop seafood processing clusters in the Mekong Delta and agro-fishery clusters along coastal Central Highlands provinces and the Northern Midlands. The country is also set to establish tourism clusters like the Marine Ecotourism Cluster in Haiphong and Quảng Ninh, the Sea Resort and Cultural Heritage Cluster in Da Nang, Hue, and Quảng Nam. The European Commission, or EC, has ended an anti-subsidy investigation into polyester staple fiber imported from 3 countries, including Vietnam, which is expected to boost fiber exports to Europe. According to the Vietnam Competition Authority, after it has collected information questionnaires from compulsory dependents identified earlier, along with the results of an on-site investigation, the EC learned that the subsidy rate for the Vietnam PSF was only 1.25%. According to the regulations of the World Trade Organization and the EC, anti-subsidy investigations must be stopped in a case where the subsidy rate is less than 2%. This was the first anti-subsidy case made against Vietnam in the European Union. Winning the case is significant and reflects the Vietnamese government's efforts and assistance extended to the EC during the investigation since the announcement was made on December 19, 2013. Amid fierce competition, low demand and overproduction, the Ministry of Industry and Trade will intensify measures in 2015 to expand the nation's rice exports, especially to the African, West Asian and South Asian markets, as citing them as high-demand markets where Vietnam can compete on price. Currently, the primary suppliers of rice to Africa are Thailand, India, Pakistan, Vietnam and the United States. In order to raise rice exports to these markets, the Ministry of Industry and Trade aims to strengthen marketing and promotion efforts and coordinate more with other governmental agencies. The ministry will also set up bonded warehouses in key markets such as Cameroon, Angola and Mozambique to facilitate Vietnamese exporters and improve market accessibility. Ho Chi Minh City recently granted investment certificates to Korean invested Noplan Vietnam and Wardon Vietnam of the UK this Wednesday. With this certificate, Noplan Vietnam will increase its investment from $43 million to $61 million. Meanwhile, Wardon Vietnam will build a fashion design center and a factory on an area of 52 hectares to produce high-quality clothing. The company will build houses on 7 hectares of land for workers in Dong Nam Industrial Park with an estimated cost of $300 million. Noplan Vietnam was established in 2002 with an investment capital of $3 million. Having begun with a plant and 15 production chains, the company now has 3 factories with 120 production chains. We've just reviewed several highlights in the economic scene for the past week. Up next, we'll talk about Vietnam's remittances and their impacts on the socio-economic development of the country in our crosstalk. The World Bank has ranked Vietnam in the top 10 recipient countries of overseas remittances, having received $11 billion in 2013 and an estimated $12 billion in 2014. For Vietnam, overseas remittances were the second largest source of income after foreign direct investment and even higher than disbursed ODA. In this week's edition of Crosstalk, we'll find out what's behind the steady rise of remittances to Vietnam and how remittances are being used to contribute to the country's socio-economic development. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Nguyễn Việt Cường, Vice Director of the Institute of Public Policy and Management under the National Economic University, who has conducted extensive research on the impact of inbound remittances. But before we talk, let's take a look at our following report. Hương visits the bank once a month to receive money from her relatives. Each month, she receives between a few hundred and $1,000.
Trước đây cũng sử dụng nhiều dịch vụ ở ngoài chợ đen ấy, nhưng mà cảm thấy không yên tâm. Khi mà sử dụng ở tại đây thì mọi việc thì đều có ngân hàng bảo đảm rồi, cho nên cũng hoàn toàn yên tâm.
Vietinbank is among the commercial banks actively participating in the remittance market. Having established its global market transfer company to advance in the sector, the bank now receives around 15% of the total remittances sent to Vietnam.
Vietinbank cũng đẩy mạnh cái công nghệ hiện đại để xử lý các giao dịch chuyển tiền từ nước ngoài về Việt Nam nhanh chóng, thuận lợi với cái chi phí cạnh tranh. Khách hàng có thể là đến lĩnh tiền ở mọi nơi trên toàn quốc. Khách hàng có thể là ngồi tại nhà mà chỉ cần nhấp chuột thôi, qua internet hoặc qua mobile đều có thể là chuyển tiền và nhận tiền. Cái thời gian tới thì chúng tôi sẽ tập trung vào phát triển các cái mảng dịch vụ thanh toán cá nhân, tăng cường bán chéo sản phẩm.
Besides Vietinbank, other commercial banks have reached out to global big names in the money transfer market, such as Western Union, Express Money, and Wells Fargo. Experts point out various reasons behind the remittances to Vietnam jumping from $35 million in 1991 to $12 billion in 2014. Among these is a fundamental change in the national policies towards overseas Vietnamese.
Cái lượng tiền kiều hối là không hạn chế, có thể nhận dưới dạng Việt Nam đồng hay là ngoại tệ.
Recipients are now exempt from paying taxes on remittances. Also, overseas Vietnamese are encouraged to return to Vietnam, purchase houses, and invest in the country. Generally, they are more confident in sending money to Vietnam because of Vietnam's stable economy and growing opportunities.
Cái nguyên nhân quan trọng mà nó khiến cái kiều hối Việt Nam tăng rất là mạnh trong thời gian qua, đấy là nhiều cái cơ hội kinh doanh đã nảy sinh trong thời gian qua, đặc biệt là từ sau khi Việt Nam gia nhập WTO. Các cái cơ hội kinh doanh có thể thấy trên 3 cái kênh. Một là chứng khoán, hai là bất động sản, ba là các cái hội kinh doanh khác.
Cumulative remittances to Vietnam between 1991 and 2013 reached $80.4 billion. This is Vietnam's second largest source of income, only after FDI and higher than disbursed ODA. In the year ahead, Vietnam expects to attract $14 billion in remittances. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today. So first of all, as you know, global economy has been experiencing slow growth for the past few years. However, remittances to Vietnam has been on a steady rise. How do you explain this?
As you know, the remittance increased in Vietnam quite quickly and over 30% annually. And even in the periods from 29 until now, the world economy is slowed down, but the remittance to Vietnam is still increased. So I think at least there are two reasons. The first one is the labor export of Vietnam is increased over time. Vietnam has quite many policies to encourage people to send migrants to overseas. And for example, they can provide loan with a low interest for the household to pay the migration cost, and they also have some provide the vocational training, and so that the people they can have the skill. More important is that the government of Vietnam they have many policies that they encourage the people they send their remittances. For example, when the people they send remittance, they do not have to pay tax, and overseas Vietnamese they are allowed to buy the house, to buy the land since 2010, so they can buy the land.
So one of the reasons why remittances have been coming to Vietnam is the stable exchange rate that the State Bank of Vietnam has been managed to control. How do you think about this?
We not only keep the exchange rate stable, but we also keep the inflation rate, especially the two recent years. So the low inflation that encourages the people, they have the more confidence, more trust in the economy, and they also send more remittances.
So what other aspects of Vietnam's economy have contributed to the steady rise of remittances into the country?
Vietnam, we have a lot of laborers, but we lack the capital. So in the developed country like the US or Canada or Europe country, the capital is abundant. So when the people they send the remittance to Vietnam for investment, so they can expect the higher profits than they can have in their developed country. So and recently, as I mentioned, in Vietnam we have the quite stable economy, and economic growth is also although we have the slowdown a little bit, but economic growth is still positive, and that's why the remittance sent to Vietnam is still increased in recent years.
How do you think about the banking system and how it has supported Vietnamese people to receive remittances from other countries?
So, as you know, the banking is expanded quickly and recently. So, especially several state bank, not state bank, but state commercial bank, they have the branch in all the district, not only in the cities, but also in the rural area. So that have the people they can easily to receive the remittance. And in addition, we also have other financial services such as the Western Union, and the people they can receive from the Western Union.
Many experts have pointed out that the official figures do not capture the true amount of remittances pouring into the country, because parts of the remittances actually manage to bypass the official banking system. So a report by CIEM and Western Union find out that 25% of the remittances had been transferred through informal channels. Why do you think this is happening?
Yes, I think in addition to the banking system, and there's many ways the people they can send remittance to Vietnam. So nowadays the people they travel a lot. So overseas Vietnamese they also visit the homeland, and we also go abroad for visiting. And when we go back, we can bring the remittances. So that is sometimes it's a convenient way for the people, especially in our country. The people they still use cash there quite often. In addition, some people they can send the remittance by some private service, but we should be careful because according to the government regulations, some agents like including the Go Shop and foreign exchange encounter, they are not allowed to send the remittance. So when they are find out properly, they have to pay the fine because they transfer the remittance illegally.
So official and unofficial figures all show that Vietnam has been receiving an increasing amount of remittances. But how are remittances used when they get to the hands of the people? We'll find out more in the following. Le's family in Thanh Khê commune in the northern province of Hải Dương is looking forward to an extra special Tết celebration this year as they have just moved into a new house. The house construction was paid for by money that Le's husband saved over the past 8 years. He's been working in Korea.
Ngày anh đi thì có tiền gửi về thì tôi mua thêm được một mẫu. Tôi trồng vải này, trồng chuối này, trồng gấc này, chủ yếu là gấc này và vải này. Năm ngoái 2013 thì tôi có sửa sang nhà cửa và mua thêm được 200 mét vuông ở trên đường 190.
Also in Thanh Hà district, Phạm Văn Chien's family has tripled the size of their pig farm thanks to remittances, earning them about $4,600 per year. In fact, Thanh Hà district is now home to more than 200 households whose relatives are living and working abroad.
Đến thời điểm 30 tháng 11 năm 2014, thì lượng kiều hối về Thanh Hà chúng tôi cỡ xấp xỉ khoảng 11 triệu USD. Và dự kiến là 12 tháng năm 2014 là chúng tôi sẽ đạt là 12 triệu USD. Tăng so với năm 2013 là khoảng 15%. Cái lượng kiều hối mà khách hàng rút ở ngân hàng về thì khoảng 30% là khách hàng phục vụ cho nhu cầu chi tiêu đời sống và đầu tư sản xuất kinh doanh.
An increasing amount of remittances are being
cách Hà Nội
poured into
160
investment
km
projects
theo
of
quốc
various
lộ 2
kinds,
về phía
including
Tây.
tourism development.
Hồ Thác Bà là
For
một trong ba hồ nhân tạo lớn nhất Việt Nam hiện nay, được hình thành từ năm 1970 khi nhà máy thủy điện đầu tiên của cả nước được xây dựng.
Nếu mà về lĩnh vực đầu tư về trong nước bây giờ thì là đầu tư vào du lịch là theo tôi hiểu là tiềm năng nhất. Vì đất nước mình là một cái đất nước là biển nhiều, rừng nhiều và vẫn còn rất là nhiều hoang sơ. Thế và chính vì từ cái hoang sơ đó thì mình mới có nhiều cơ hội để đầu tư.
In the hope of providing more tourism services to attract more tourists
Cách Hà Nội
and create more
160
jobs for
km
locals,
theo quốc lộ
Lê
2
Thanh
về
Bình
phía Tây.
has been persuading
Hồ Thác
his
Bà là
friends
một
to
trong ba
invest
hồ
in
nhân
this
tạo
project.
lớn nhất Việt Nam hiện nay, được hình thành từ năm 1000.
Thì hiện bây giờ thì công ty đã cùng với hai đồng chí Việt kiều đã xây dựng một phần ở trong giai đoạn 1 của lịch trình xây dựng về đây là một cái vùng đất thì là tiềm năng. Có một số anh em Việt kiều thì cũng đã gửi gắm người nhà bên Việt Nam cũng đã mua một số cái hòn đảo.
Để đáp ứng nhu cầu du lịch ngày càng tăng cao, việc hỗ trợ nâng cấp các khách sạn, nhà hàng hiện có cũng là một trong những dự án nhiều kiều bào có ý định đầu tư. Trên địa bàn tỉnh Yên Bái, nhiều khách sạn và các
remittances were used for daily expenses, 16% for business purposes, and the remainder was spent on casual shopping, debts, fees for healthcare services, and so on. In terms of investment, 33% of the surveyed remittance recipients put the money into savings accounts. 27 to 30% invested in production, 20% invested in gold trading, and 16 to 17% invested in the real estate market. Vietnam's remittances account for 8% of the country's GDP.
Hơn 10 năm qua là nguồn vốn phần lớn thời gian là lớn thứ hai trong các cái luồng vốn so với là FDI và so với ODA, không chịu lãi suất, đúng không ạ? Rất là đúng lúc cần và nó không tiềm ẩn những cái rủi ro như là vốn ODA hay là vốn FDI. Kiều hối là đóng vai trò rất là quan trọng, bù đắp vào cái thâm hụt về cán cân thương mại trong một thời gian dài.
With the global economy subject to fluctuations, overseas remittances take on a stabilizing significance. The amount of remittances is expected to continue to rise in the years ahead and will go a long way towards creating momentum to boost economic growth. So in terms of quantity and impacts, how are remittances compared to ODA and FDI poured into Vietnam?
As you know, the remittance sent by the household people overseas Vietnamese. So it's a target directly to the household people. So in terms of the impact, so it could have the direct impact on the people welfare, the household welfare in Vietnam. For the FDI, it's also the important capital inflow to Vietnam, but the FDI is mainly they invest in the formal sector. So it could have the long-term effect on the household welfare than the remittances.
Could you elaborate on how remittances are being used in Vietnam?
Remittances, we know that from the theory, so the people, they send the remittances to the families because of, I think, for three reasons. So the first reason is we call the altruism. So they simply send the remittance because of love. So when the people, they have the money, they can earn the higher money in the abroad, so they want to share their benefit with their family members, so they send the remittance. So that's the remittance might be used for the consumption, and especially when the people, they see the family have the difficulty in their health problem or education, they can send the remittance. Second reason is for the labor export. When they're sending the migrants, they have to pay their migration costs. For example, the vocational training and language studies, they have to borrow the money. And when the migrants, they're working abroad, they should return the money. So that family can pay the debt. And the third reason, and also very important, is that people want to send the remittance to invest in their production and the business, especially in Vietnam. We have the quite stable economic condition. Economy is quite stable, and so about 10 years ago, so I conducted an analysis to try to measure the effect of the remittance on the poverty. And I see at that time the people, when they receive the remittance, they tend to use for the consumption, and then they can increase their welfare and reduce the poverty. But nowadays, people who receive the remittance, they are quite rich. They are better off than 10 years ago. And a large proportion of the people, household receiving the remittance are from the Ho Chi Minh City and from Hanoi. And they have the better off. And they tend to use the remittance not for consumption, but for their investment and saving, and also they buy the housing.
So remittances have been changing their role from being a tool to alleviate poverty to a source of capital for investment. So what are the positive impacts on the socio-economic development of Vietnam that remittances have been having?
Yeah, remittance, although it do not have the direct effect on the poverty at the current, but it's, as we mentioned, the remittance is an important capital flow, so we can have the government to increase the foreign currency reserve, and we have the more foreign currency to stabilize the exchange rate, and also remittance, when they invest in the production and business, they can have some spillover effect. So, if, for example, it creates some employment opportunity for other people if they invest for remittance in the production, other than buying the land or the house.
So what are your forecasts for remittances in the coming years?
Yeah, I think the remittance that as I mentioned is depend on the economy of the hot country, of the foreign country, and also depend on the economy of Vietnam. We see the US, they have the better economic growth, the higher economic growth. So we expect that the people living in US, a country that send a lot of remittance to Vietnam. So I think the remittance could be increased in the near future, because the economic growth in the US and some countries is better than last year, and also Vietnam. If we can keep the stable economy as current, so we can expect the higher remittances in the future.
Now, in conclusion, what are needed to be done in order to keep this trend, the rising trend of remittances into Vietnam?
From the micro aspect, so the government should have the policy so that we can stimulate, they can promote more migrants, and for example, provide the loan for the people, the preferred loan, the low interest rate loan, and also more the vocational training for the people. And then the government also pay part of the cost of the migration to people, so that we can increase the labor export in the future. In Vietnam, we should keep the economy is stable. So there are two important issues. The first, we should keep the inflation rate is low. For example, I think the 5% like 2014 is very good. So and also we keep the exchange rate is stable. Sometimes of course we can depreciate the exchange rate a little bit so that we can increase the export or we can attract some little bit more remittance. But basically we should keep the economy is stable, so that's the overseas Vietnamese, they can feel confident and trust when they sending the money. And of course we should very necessary we maintain the high economic growth.
Well, thank you very much for joining our program. With more Vietnamese laborers being sent overseas for work, more convenient remittance services at banks, more sound monetary policies, and a more stable macroeconomy, Vietnam has been receiving an increasing flow of remittances. Inward remittances in 2014 are estimated to have reached $12 billion. This capital inflow has improved the lives of many Vietnamese households and become an important financial source for investment. We hope that this trend will continue and remittances will be used even more efficiently to contribute to Vietnam's socio-economic development. And that wraps up this edition of Bizline. Thank you very much for being with us. Don't forget to log on to vtv4.vn or youtube.com/vtv4girl for other updates. And goodbye.